The doctor said triplets, and I felt my entire future collapse in that single word. I sat frozen in the plastic chair, my scholarship acceptance letter still folded in my backpack, my shift at the diner starting in 2 hours, and now this impossible thing growing inside me. 3 impossible things. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Dr. Patel waited for me to react, her kind eyes watching me process information my brain refused to accept. That can't be right, I finally managed. I came in because I've been tired. I thought maybe I was anemic or something. She turned the monitor toward me, and there they were, 3 tiny flickering heartbeats on the grainy screen, each one a separate grenade thrown into the carefully constructed plan I'd spent 18 years building. I was supposed to start at Columbia in the fall. I was supposed to escape the cramped apartment I shared with my mom and 2 younger brothers. I was supposed to be the first person in my family to graduate college. Based on the measurements, you're about 9 weeks along, Dr. Patel said gently. I know this is overwhelming. Do you have support? The father? He doesn't know. The words came out sharper than I intended. He can't know. Because how do you tell someone like Adrian Westbrook that the single night you spent together, the night he'd walked into the dive bar where I worked, ordered an expensive scotch in a room full of beer drinkers, and somehow ended up talking to me until closing, had consequences? How do you call a man whose face appeared in Forbes and Business Insider and tell him you're carrying his children when you don't even have his phone number? I'd Googled him the next morning, lying in his penthouse bed while he slept, my phone screen illuminating the casual wealth around me. Artwork I later learned cost more than my mom's annual salary, sheets that probably cost more than my rent. Adrian Westbrook, 32, CEO of Westbrook Industries, estimated net worth $3.2 billion. I'd slipped out before he woke because girls like me didn't belong in worlds like his, and I'd spent the last 2 months trying to forget the way he'd looked at me like I was something precious. Now I was pregnant with his triplets, and I couldn't even afford the copay for this appointment. I need to think, I told Dr. Patel, already standing, already running. The spring air hit me as I pushed through the clinic doors, and I walked without direction, my mind spinning through impossible math. I had $1,247 in my bank account, my scholarship covered tuition but not housing. I worked 30 hours a week at the diner and picked up babysitting jobs on weekends. I survived on ramen and day-old bagels from the cafe where my friend Maya worked. None of that math included 1 baby, let alone 3. My phone buzzed, my manager asking if I could cover an extra shift tomorrow. I said yes automatically because I always said yes, because every dollar mattered, because I'd been saving for months to afford textbooks and a meal plan, and maybe for once in my life, not having to choose between eating and keeping the lights on. I stopped walking when I realized I was standing outside the public library where I'd spent most of my high school afternoons, studying at the scratched tables, using the free Wi-Fi to submit college applications. The building represented everything I was supposed to become: educated, successful, free. Now I'd be lucky to defer enrollment for a year that would turn into 2, then 5, then never. The tears came hot and fast, and I ducked into the library bathroom to cry in a stall like I had so many times before, muffling the sound with my hand because even my grief had to be quiet and convenient. When I finally went home, my mom took one look at my face and knew. She always knew. "What happened?" she asked, her hands still wet from washing dishes, her body already tense for the next crisis, because our lives were just a series of managed catastrophes. "I'm pregnant." The words felt like glass in my throat. "Triplets." She sat down heavily at our kitchen table, the one we'd bought from a yard sale when I was 7, and I watched her run through the same impossible calculations I had. We couldn't afford this. We could barely afford what we had. "The father," she asked finally. "He doesn't know. He won't know." I said it with more certainty than I felt. "Sophia." "Mom, he's a billionaire. He lives in a world where people like us don't exist. What am I supposed to do? Show up at his office with a positive pregnancy test and hope he believes me? Hope he doesn't think I'm just trying to trap him for money? She was quiet for a long moment. What do you want to do? That was the question, wasn't it? What did I want? I wanted Columbia. I wanted the future I'd worked so hard for. I wanted to not be afraid every time I checked my bank balance. But I also felt those 3 heartbeats flickering inside me, and despite everything, despite the terrible timing and impossible circumstances, I wanted them too.
I don't know, I whispered. I really don't know. The next weeks passed in a blur of morning sickness that lasted all day, double shifts at the diner where the smell of grease made me nauseous, and sleepless nights where I researched prenatal care and government assistance and tried not to think about the life I was losing. I deferred my enrollment to spring semester, telling the admissions office I needed to work and save money, which was true enough. I told myself I'd figure it out. I always figured it out. Then one Tuesday afternoon, Adrian Westbrook walked into the diner. I was wiping down tables in the back section, my apron hiding the small bump that had started to show, when I heard his voice at the front counter. That same deep, warm voice that had asked me about my dreams while we'd talked until 3 a.m, that had whispered my name like a prayer. My first instinct was to run to the kitchen and hide, but he'd already seen me. Our eyes met across the room, and his face transformed with recognition and something that looked like relief. Sophia! He said my name like he'd been looking for me. I've been trying to find you. My heart hammered as he crossed the diner, expensive shoes on worn linoleum, designer suit in a room full of construction workers and truckers. Everyone was staring. How did you... I started, but couldn't finish. I remembered you mentioned working at a diner near Columbia, he said. I visited everyone within a 3-mile radius. He smiled, tentative and hopeful. You left without saying goodbye. I didn't think you'd notice, I managed. Notice? Sophia, I haven't stopped thinking about you since that night. I wanted to see you again, but I didn't have your number, didn't know your last name. I even hired a private investigator before I realized how creepy that sounded. A private investigator? To find me? The absurdity would have been funny if I wasn't actively hiding a pregnancy from him, while my manager shot me annoyed looks for talking instead of working. I'm working, I said, desperately trying to angle my body so he couldn't see my stomach. I can't really talk right now. When do you get off? We could have dinner, talk properly. Adrian, that night it was nice, but we're from different worlds. It can't happen again. His expression shifted, hurt flickering across his features. Why not? Because I have money? Sophia, I don't care about any of that. I care about the woman who spent 3 hours debating philosophy with me, who made me laugh harder than I have in years, who looked at me like I was just a person instead of a bank account. I felt the words rising in my throat. I'm pregnant. You're going to be a father. Everything's about to change. But fear held them back. Fear that he'd think I'd planned this, that I was like every other person who probably wanted something from him, that he'd look at me differently once he knew. I really have to get back to work, I said, hating myself for the cowardice. He studied me for a long moment, and I wondered what he saw. Did he notice the exhaustion in my eyes? The way my uniform hung looser on top and tighter around the middle, the fear I couldn't quite hide. Okay, he said finally, pulling out his wallet. He extracted a business card and handed it to me. But if you change your mind, call me, please. I took the card with shaking hands, and he left, the door chiming behind him. I stood there holding his direct line while his children grew inside me, and I knew I was running out of time to keep this secret. That night, I finally broke down and called Maya, my best friend since sophomore year, the only person besides my mom who knew about the pregnancy. I'm going to start showing soon, I told her, staring at the reflection in the bathroom mirror, at the unmistakable curve of my stomach. Like, really showing. People are already asking if I've gained weight. So, tell him, Maya said, simply. Sophia, he came looking for you. That means something. It means he liked me before he knew I was pregnant with triplets. That's different than signing up for this level of responsibility. Or maybe he's actually a decent guy who deserves to know he's going to be a father. I wanted to believe that, but I'd seen too many girls at my high school get abandoned, too many single mothers struggling alone, too many promises broken when things got hard. And that's without the complication of billions of dollars and different social classes. What if he thinks I'm trying to trap him? I asked quietly. What if he doesn't? What if you're denying him the chance to step up because you're too scared to find out? She was right, but that didn't make it easier. 2 days later, I was restocking ketchup bottles when my manager called me into her office. She'd been giving me pointed looks all week, and I braced myself for another lecture about taking too many bathroom breaks. Sophia, are you pregnant? She asked bluntly.
The denial died on my lips because I was terrible at lying and getting worse at hiding it. Yes. She sighed, and I saw the decision in her eyes before she spoke. I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to let you go. You're moving slower, taking more breaks, and I need reliable staff. I'll give you 2 weeks severance. Please, I heard myself say. I need this job. I'll work harder. I won't take breaks. It's not personal, it's business. You're due in what, 6 months? I can't have you going on maternity leave right before the summer rush. I left her office in a daze, untied my apron with numb fingers, and walked out into the afternoon sun, unemployed and pregnant with no backup plan. The severance would last maybe 3 weeks if I was careful. Then what? I was halfway home when my phone rang. Unknown number. Sophia? Adrian's voice. Don't hang up. I know you said we're from different worlds, but I can't accept that. Have dinner with me, please. Just one dinner. Maybe it was losing my job. Maybe it was the fear that had been building for weeks. Maybe it was Maya's voice in my head asking, what if he doesn't think the worst of me? Whatever it was, I found myself saying yes. He picked me up that evening in a car that cost more than my mom would make in 5 years, and I felt acutely aware of my discount store dress and drugstore makeup. But when I slid into the passenger seat, he looked at me like I was wearing diamonds. You look beautiful, he said softly. You don't have to say that. I know. I wanted to. He took me to a small Italian restaurant in the West Village, the kind of place that looked unassuming from the outside, but where I knew the prices would make my eyes water. We sat at a corner table with candlelight flickering between us, and he asked about school, about my family, about my dreams like he had that first night. And I lied. I told him I'd deferred for financial reasons, which was true but incomplete. I told him work was fine, which was a complete fabrication. I told him everything except the truth expanding in my womb while I pushed pasta around my plate and tried not to cry from the weight of my deception. Sophia, he said finally, reaching across the table to take my hand. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. My heart stopped. Did I do something wrong? That night we spent together, did I overstep or make you uncomfortable? Because the way you left, the way you've been avoiding me, I keep thinking I must have done something. The concern in his voice, the genuine worry that he'd hurt me somehow, broke something loose in my chest. No, God no, Adrian. You were perfect. That night was perfect. That's the problem. How is that a problem? Because it was a fantasy. You're this successful, wealthy person living an extraordinary life, and I'm a girl from Queens who eats ramen for dinner and uses library computers. That night was amazing, but it wasn't real life. It was real to me, he said quietly. Sophia, I've dated plenty of women from my world. Women who wanted the right last name, the right connections, the right photo opportunities. None of them made me feel the way you did in a single night. You talked to me about philosophy and social justice, and whether consciousness could exist without language. Do you know how rare that is? How much I've missed it? Adrian, I'm not saying we're the same, we're not, but I am saying that the things that matter, intelligence, humor, kindness, authenticity, you have all of them. The rest is just circumstances. I wanted so badly to believe him, but circumstances included 3 babies I couldn't afford and a future collapsing around me. There's something I need to tell you, I heard myself say. His thumb traced circles on my palm, patient, waiting. I'm pregnant. The words hung between us like a held breath. His hand stilled on mine, his expression shifting through shock, disbelief, calculation. How far along? He asked, his voice carefully neutral. About 13 weeks, and Adrian, it's triplets. I watched him process this, watched the implications cascade across his face. He pulled his hand back, and I felt the loss of his touch like a physical thing. You're sure they're mine? There hasn't been anyone else, not before you, not since. And you waited 13 weeks to tell me? I was scared, I said, my voice breaking. I was scared you'd think exactly what you're thinking, that I'm some girl trying to trap you for money. I didn't plan this, Adrian. I didn't even know who you were that night until I Googled you the next morning. He stood abruptly, threw cash on the table, way too much, and I thought, this is it. This is where he leaves. But instead, he said, let's go somewhere private. We need to talk, and I can't do it here. We ended up back at his penthouse, the same space where we'd spent that first night, and being there made everything feel more real and more impossible simultaneously. He poured himself a drink, scotch, expensive, the same thing he'd ordered at the dive bar, and stood at the window overlooking the city. I need to know everything, he said finally. Why you left that morning, why you didn't contact me, what your plan was. So I told him. I told him about deferring Columbia, about working double shifts and losing my job, about the impossible math of raising 3 children alone. I told him about my mom's worry and Maya's advice and my fear that his world would eat me alive. I laid out every truth I'd been carrying, and when I finished, I felt hollowed out and strangely lighter. He was quiet for a long time. You thought I wouldn't help, he said finally. I thought you'd think I planned it. Did you? No. He turned to face me, and I couldn't read his expression. I believe you. I don't know why, but I do. Maybe because the Sophia I met wouldn't play games like that. Maybe because you've clearly been suffering through this alone when you could have come to me months ago if you wanted money. I don't want your money, I said quickly. I know, but you need it, don't you? You need help. The truth of it sat heavy in the room. Yes. He sat down across from me, and when he spoke, his voice was different, businesslike, decisive. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to move into one of my properties. I have a brownstone in Brooklyn that's sitting empty. You're going to get proper prenatal care, and I'm paying for it. You're going to eat real food and stop working yourself to death. And we're going to figure this out together. Adrian, I can't just accept. Yes, you can, because those are my children too, and I take care of what's mine. The possessiveness in his tone should have bothered me, but instead I felt something like relief unfurl in my chest. Not because I needed rescuing, but because for the first time in months, I wasn't alone in this. What about us? I asked quietly. What about us? That night, what we had, was that real or just a fantasy? He crossed the space between us and cupped my face in his hands. It was the most real thing I've felt in years. And yes, we have complications now. Yes, we're doing this backward. But Sophia, I meant what I said. I haven't stopped thinking about you. If anything, finding out you're carrying my children just makes me more certain. Certain of what? That I want to try, that I want to see where this goes, that I want to be there for all of it, the pregnancy, the babies, you, if you'll let me. I searched his face for doubt, for resentment, for any sign this was obligation masquerading as desire. But all I saw was the same man who'd stayed up until 3 in the morning listening to me talk about my dreams, who'd looked at me like I mattered. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay." The next months were a strange adjustment. Adrian moved me into the brownstone, and I spent the first week just wandering through rooms that were bigger than my entire apartment, touching furniture that cost more than I'd made in a year. My mom and brothers visited and stood wide-eyed in the foyer, and I saw the same disbelief I felt reflected in their faces. Adrian hired a team of doctors who monitored the pregnancy obsessively. Triplets were high risk, they explained, especially for a first-time mother. There would be regular ultrasounds, careful management, probable bed rest toward the end. The medical bills made my head spin, but Adrian waved them away like they were nothing. "This is what I do," he said when I tried to thank him. "I solve problems, and you and our babies are the most important problem I'll ever solve." He was there for every appointment, holding my hand through ultrasounds, asking detailed questions about development and risk factors, his expression intense with focus. This was Adrian, the CEO, the man who'd built an empire through intelligence and determination, and he approached impending fatherhood the same way he approached business, with comprehensive research and unwavering commitment. But there were softer moments, too. Late nights when he'd come home from work and find me reading on the couch, when he'd sit down and put his hand on my growing stomach and talk to the babies about his day. Sunday mornings when he'd make me elaborate breakfasts because he'd read that protein was important for fetal development. Evenings when we'd watch movies and I'd fall asleep against his shoulder and wake up in his bed with no memory of being carried there. We were building something, slow and careful, on a foundation of 3 tiny heartbeats. But the outside world was less kind. When news leaked that Adrian Westbrook was having triplets with an unknown woman from Queens, the media descended like vultures. Photographers camped outside the brownstone, gossip sites ran stories speculating about who I was and what I wanted. The headlines were vicious. Billionaire baby trap, from rags to riches, Westbrook's mystery baby mama. Adrian's publicist wanted me to do an interview to control the narrative, but I refused. I didn't owe strangers an explanation of my pregnancy or my relationship. Adrian supported my decision, even when his board members expressed concern about the optics. "Let them talk," he said. "The people who matter know the truth." But it was hard. Hard to see my face on tabloid covers. Hard to read comments from strangers who called me a gold digger and worse. Hard to attend events on Adrian's arm and feel the judgment from his social circle. These were people for whom wealth was inherited and expected, who viewed my background with barely concealed disdain. At a charity gala when I was 7 months pregnant, a woman in diamonds approached me at the bar. "You must be so excited," she said, her smile sharp, landing Adrian Westbrook and his fortune all at once, quite the achievement for a girl from Queens. I felt Adrian tense beside me, but I spoke before he could. I didn't land anything. I got pregnant by accident and chose to keep the babies. Adrian chose to be involved. Those were separate decisions made by separate people. "Of course," she said, not believing a word. "And the fact that he's worth billions had nothing to do with your choice?" "The fact that he's worth billions almost made me not tell him," I said evenly, "because I knew people like you would assume the worst of me no matter what I did. But I decided I'd rather deal with your judgment than deprive my children of their father." She blinked, surprised by the directness, and Adrian's hand found mine, squeezing gently. "If you'll excuse us," he said coldly, "my partner and I have better conversations waiting elsewhere." Partner. Not girlfriend, not mother of his children, but partner. Equal. Later that night, lying in bed with his hand on my stomach, feeling the babies move, I asked him why he stayed when it would be so much easier to just pay child support and move on. "Because easy isn't always right," he said simply. And because when I look at you, I don't see your bank balance or your zip code or what tabloids write. I see the woman who challenged my thinking, who makes me laugh, who's giving me 3 children I never knew I wanted. I see my future, Sophia. If you'll have me. I turned to face him in the darkness. Adrian, I've been in survival mode my whole life. I don't know how to do this. The wealth, the attention, your world. I'm terrified I'll mess it up. Then we'll mess it up together, he said, and figure it out as we go. That's what partners do. The babies came early, at 34 weeks, delivered via C-section in a pristine private hospital room. 2 boys and a girl, tiny and perfect and impossibly real. Adrian held them one by one, tears streaming down his face, and I fell in love with him completely in that moment, not for his money or his status, but for the way he looked at our children like they were the greatest achievement of his life. We named them carefully. James, after my grandfather, who died when I was young, Lucas, after Adrian's father, and Emma, a name we both simply loved. They spent 2 weeks in the NICU, growing stronger, and Adrian and I took turns keeping vigil, learning to feed and change and soothe 3 tiny humans who needed us completely. When we finally brought them home to the brownstone, reality hit hard. 3 newborns meant 3 times the feeding, changing, crying, and exhaustion. We hired a night nurse, but I insisted on doing most of the care myself, driven by some deep need to prove I was a good mother despite my age and circumstances. Adrian watched me run myself ragged for a week before he intervened. "Sophia, stop," he said, taking a screaming Emma from my arms. "You're going to collapse. Let me help. Let the nurse help. This isn't a test you have to pass alone." "I need to prove I can do this," I said, exhausted and emotional. "Everyone thinks I got pregnant to trap you. I need to show I'm a good mother." "You are a good mother, but martyring yourself doesn't prove anything except that you're stubborn." He bounced Emma gently, and she quieted against his chest. "We're in this together, remember? Stop trying to do it all alone." So I learned to accept help, from Adrian, from the nurse, from my mom who came over most afternoons. I learned that asking for support wasn't weakness, but wisdom. I learned that partnership meant sharing burdens, not bearing them alone. Columbia reached out during those early months, asking about my plans to enroll. I deferred again, unable to imagine juggling school and 3 infants. But Adrian had other ideas.
"What if you started part-time?" he suggested. "1 or 2 classes to begin with? I can adjust my schedule to be home more. We have the nurse. Your mom's available. Sophia, you've sacrificed enough. Don't give up on your dreams because of circumstances." "Adrian, I have 3 newborns. I can't—" "You can," he said firmly, "not because you have to prove anything, but because you earned that scholarship, because you deserve the education you worked so hard for, because our children should grow up seeing their mother pursue her goals." So I enrolled in 2 classes that fall, sneaking in reading time during naps and writing papers while Adrian did midnight feedings. It was hard, maybe the hardest thing I'd ever done, but also deeply satisfying. I was still me, still Sophia who loved learning, who had ambitions beyond motherhood, who refused to be defined by a single role. Adrian proposed on a random Tuesday evening while we were giving the babies a bath. No fanfare, no elaborate setup, just him looking at me across 3 squirming infants and saying, "Marry me." I paused mid-soap. "What?" "Marry me, not because of the babies or because it's expected, but because I love you, because I want to build a life with you, because somewhere between that first night and this moment, you became essential to me." "Adrian, we've only been together." "I don't care about timelines or what's traditional. I know what I want, and it's you. All of you, the brilliant mind, the stubborn independence, the fierce love you have for our children. Sophia Chen, will you marry me?" I looked at him, this man who'd shown up when it mattered, who'd chosen me every day since finding out about the pregnancy, who'd never once made me feel less than because of where I came from. "Yes," I said, and he kissed me with soapy hands while our children splashed around us, and it was perfect in its imperfection. We married quietly 6 months later, just family and close friends, in the brownstones' garden. I wore a simple dress, and my mother cried happy tears. My brothers were ushers and couldn't stop grinning. Maya was my maid of honor and told me she'd known all along we'd end up here. The tabloids eventually lost interest in our story. We became old news, replaced by fresher scandals. Sometimes I still saw the occasional comment online calling me a gold digger, but they bothered me less now. I knew my truth. Adrian knew my truth. That was enough. I graduated from Columbia 3 years later with a degree in social work, walking across that stage with Adrian and 3 toddlers cheering in the audience. It took me longer than planned, but I made it. And now I work with young mothers in situations like mine once was, helping them navigate resources and options, using Adrian's wealth to fund programs that make a real difference. The money still feels surreal sometimes. I still shop sales and use coupons despite Adrian's amusement. But I've learned to accept it as a tool rather than a definition. It means my mom doesn't work double shifts anymore. It means my brothers got to go to college debt-free. It means I can help other women who face impossible choices with limited resources. Late one night, after the children are asleep and Adrian and I are finally alone, I tell him about that day in the clinic when I first heard the word triplets. I thought my life was ending, I admit. I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. And now, he asks? I look around our home, at the photos on the walls, the toys scattered across expensive rugs, the life we've built from 3 unexpected heartbeats. Now I know it was actually beginning.